put the candle back. Young Frankenstein wasn't just a parody of classic horror, it was a lightning strike of genius, a film where chaos, comedy, and creativity clashed in ways audiences never saw. Behind the perfectly timed gags and gothic black and white imagery, the set was filled with wild improvisations, furious arguments, and jaw-dropping accidents. Today we're revealing 20 weird facts about Young Frankenstein. From drunken meltdowns to cut scenes that shocked test audiences, and the hidden history of a prop straight from Frankenstein's original 1931 set. And stick around because our bonus fact is so strange that it could change the way you watch the movie forever. Let's dive in. Gene Wilder fought for the black and white format. The studio wanted color, Mel Brooks wanted box office appeal, but Gene Wilder, the film's co-writer and star, threatened to walk if Young Frankenstein wasn't filmed in black and white. He argued that without it, the film would look like a cheap spoof instead of an authentic homage. Wilder even said, "If it's not black and white, count me out." Universal hated the idea. Execs claimed audiences would reject it in 1974, but Wilder won, and the choice became legendary. The film's monochrome palette wasn't just nostalgic, it created eerie authenticity, tricking audiences into feeling like they were watching a lost Universal monster movie. What seemed like box office suicide ended up giving the film timeless power, cementing it as one of the most visually striking comedies ever made. The laboratory equipment was real. From the 1931 Frankenstein, those wild, sparking machines in Dr. Frankenstein's lab weren't mock-ups. They were original props, carefully preserved from James Whale's 1931 Frankenstein. Special effects designer Kenneth Strickfaden had stored them for decades, and when Mel Brooks discovered their existence, he begged to borrow them. The result? The lab scenes look hauntingly authentic because they were. You're not just watching a parody, you're seeing history resurrected. Strickfaden even came out of semi-retirement to operate some of the equipment himself. Audiences felt the hum of cinematic history, making the parody feel less like mockery and more like resurrection. Not X, but Y. Not just comedy props, but living relics of horror cinema that blurred the line between spoof and sequel. The "Puttin' on the Ritz" number was almost cut. The film's most iconic scene, the monster and Frankenstein dancing to "Puttin' on the Ritz," almost never made it to the screen. Gene Wilder had written it into the script, but Mel Brooks thought it was too absurd and threatened to derail the film's gothic tone. Wilder reportedly screamed, "It's the heart of the movie!" After a heated argument that nearly ended their partnership, Brooks relented. Ironically, test audiences roared with laughter, turning it into the film's show-stopping moment. This nearly tore apart the film's creators ended up cementing its place in cinematic comedy. It wasn't just a joke. It was a risky gamble that redefined how far parody could go without collapsing under its own silliness. Marty Feldman's crossed eyes weren't acting. Marty Feldman, who played Igor, had a natural condition called Graves' disease, which caused his eyes to bulge and misalign, but he weaponized it for comedy, turning what might have been a career obstacle into an unforgettable trademark. Feldman improvised many of Igor's quirks, including the moving hump gag. No one told the crew. It simply appeared on the wrong shoulder in successive takes, and Feldman insisted, deadpan, "What hump?" The crew broke into laughter so often that Brooks left the gag in. Feldman's eyes weren't just a medical quirk, they became a visual signature of Young Frankenstein's anarchic spirit, a reminder that imperfection could be its own brand of genius. Terry Garr's role came out of nowhere. Terry Garr, who played Inga, wasn't even on the casting shortlist. She had been known mostly as a dancer in Elvis movies and small TV parts. When she auditioned, Brooks reportedly dismissed her with a wave. But Gene Wilder championed her, sensing her comedic timing was perfect. Garr leaned into her German accent, delivering lines like "roll, roll, roll in the hay" with a mix of innocence and cheeky allure. Suddenly she transformed from background dancer to comedy star. Gar later credited the film for saving her career, proving she could do more than just shake a tambourine in the background. Not just comic relief, but a breakthrough role that catapulted her into a new Hollywood trajectory. Peter Boyle's monster nearly got him fired. Peter Boyle, who played the monster, was no stranger to serious acting, but during early rehearsals, Brooks reportedly thought Boyle was too frightening, not funny enough. He towered over the cast, grunting and growling with an intensity that felt more horror than parody. Brooks nearly replaced him, but Gene Wilder argued that Boyle's menacing presence was exactly what the film needed. The laughs would come from the contrast between his terrifying look and childlike behavior. Boyle embraced the challenge, even insisting on doing his own stunts, like smashing through doors. By the time Putting on the Ritz came around, his transformation was undeniable, a hulking brute in tap shoes, fumbling through elegance, not just a monster, but a mirror of the film itself, balancing menace with absurdity. Boyle's near-firing became the film's saving grace. Cloris Leachman terrified the cast off-screen. Cloris Leachman, who played Frau Blucher, was already an Oscar winner when she joined the cast, but instead of treating Young Frankenstein like a light comedy, she played it with chilling seriousness. She refused to break character between takes, glaring at the crew, muttering lines under her breath, and once reportedly making a makeup artist cry. Her presence was so intense that even Gene Wilder confessed, "She scared me more than Boris Karloff ever did." The infamous Blucher horse whinny gag? Brooks claimed Leachman herself suggested it, loving the idea that her very name could freeze blood. Not parody, but menace. Not slapstick, but dread. Leachman gave the comedy its spine, proving that laughs can be rooted in genuine unease. The seduction scene almost caused a walkout. One of the strangest and most controversial moments comes when the monster meets Elizabeth, Madeline Kahn, in the cave. Originally, the script played it strictly as a horror scene, but Kahn insisted it needed a comic twist. The idea of Elizabeth enjoying the encounter horrified the studio, who begged Brooks to cut it. Even some cast members thought it crossed the line, but Brooks, never one to back down, doubled down. Test audiences howled with laughter, transforming what might have been an awkward stumble into one of the film's most quoted scenes. Kahn's fearless delivery, singing "Ah, Sweet Mystery of Life," mid-chaos, turned controversy into comedy gold. What almost became a scandal became proof of the film's daring balance between parody and provocation. Gene Wilder and Mel Brooks had explosive fights. Their collaboration looks effortless on screen, but behind the curtain, Wilder and Brooks clashed constantly. Wilder was meticulous, demanding precise timing, while Brooks thrived on chaos, pushing for improvisation. During script sessions, they fought so loudly that neighbors in Brooks' New York apartment complained. The "puttin' on the Ritz" argument was just one of many blow-ups. At one point, Wilder even stormed out, telling Brooks, "You're destroying it." Brooks fired back, "It's a comedy, not Hamlet." Yet, the tension forged brilliance. Their battles weren't about ego, they were about vision, not harmony, but friction, not easy collaboration, but creative combustion. The film's seamless comedy was born from their relentless tug of war, a reminder that art often thrives on conflict, not comfort. Horses had their own special trainers, those horses that rear and scream every time Frau Blucher is mentioned. That wasn't sound effects, it was real horse acting. Brooks hired professional trainers to condition the horses to react to Leachman's presence. Crew members said the animals grew so conditioned that they would shiver or buck the moment she stepped into frame, even without cues. The trick added a surreal layer of comedy, making the gag land every single time, but it was dangerous too. Actors had to keep a safe distance, and on one occasion, A horse nearly toppled a camera. What looked like a throwaway joke was actually one of the most choreographed and risky gags in the film. And before we dive into fact number 11, go ahead and like and subscribe, because the next 10 facts reveal fights, accidents, and secrets even hardcore fans of Young Frankenstein have never heard. Mel Brooks hid himself in the movie, sort of. Brooks swore he wouldn't appear on screen. He wanted the focus on the characters, not himself. But his fingerprints are everywhere, literally. He provided multiple voices, the howls of the wolf, the cries of the cat, and even the Ovaltine whisper. Sound editors layered his ad-libs into the background, a secret cameo no one could see. Brooks joked later, "I wanted to be in the movie without ruining the movie." This wasn't ego, it was control. He was shaping the soundscape as much as the visuals. For an audience, it feels seamless. For insiders, it's a hidden Easter egg. Mel Brooks haunting his own parody, A Ghost in the Machine. Not on screen, but always present, Brooks's invisible performance proved that the director's hand never really leaves the frame. Madeline Kahn rewrote her own character. Originally, Elizabeth was written as a bland fiancée, little more than a plot device. Madeline Kahn flat out refused. She transformed the role into a whirlwind of neurotic glamour. Every line delivery, "Taffeta, darling," was her invention. She improvised Elizabeth's vanity, fussing over her nails while danger loomed. Kahn turned a shallow caricature into a living, breathing satire of Hollywood divas. Brooks later admitted, "She created a character I didn't even write." Not just supporting, but scene-stealing. Not written, but born in the moment. Kahn's fearless rewrites gave Young Frankenstein its sharpest edge, balancing Wilder's earnestness with absurd excess. Without her, the love triangle and the cave seduction wouldn't have landed with such savage hilarity. The castle wasn't in Transylvania. It was on a soundstage. Audiences believed they were in some misty corner of Europe. In truth, most of Young Frankenstein was shot on a California soundstage. The castle was a carefully constructed set, complete with trick staircases and breakaway walls. The misty graveyard, smoke machines, the frozen landscape, painted backdrops. Yet the black and white photography sold the illusion, tricking even seasoned critics. Cinematographer Gerald Hirschfeld meticulously studied old Universal films, replicating the chiaroscuro lighting of the 1930s. The result? A spoof that didn't look like parody at all. It wasn't fakery, it was craft. Every shadow was placed with surgical precision, every candlelit hallway staged like Gothic opera. What audiences didn't know was that the Europe of Young Frankenstein existed in a single Los Angeles building. The crew couldn't stop laughing, takes were ruined. The set was chaos, not from accidents, but from laughter. Marty Feldman, in particular, had the crew in stitches, improvising lines that weren't in the script. One famous outtake showed him delivering "walk this way," then hobbling absurdly until Wilder followed. Brooks kept the cameras rolling, and the gag became one of the film's most iconic, but dozens of other moments never made it past dailies because crew members' laughter bled into the audio. Cinematographer Hirschfeld later joked, "Half our budget went to ruined takes." It wasn't just comedy, it was infectious. What audiences didn't know was that behind every polished scene lay an army of cameramen and sound techs desperately stifling laughter. Not just a comedy on film, but a comedy behind the camera. Gene Hackman begged for a role. The blind hermit, who tenderly welcomes the monster, wasn't played by a comedian at all, but by Gene Hackman. At the time, Hackman had just won an Oscar for The French Connection, yet he was desperate to do comedy, and he begged Gene Wilder for a role. Wilder wrote him in as a cameo, never expecting it to work. But Hackman's deadpan delivery, pouring soup onto Peter Boyle's lap, lighting his thumb on fire, became one of the film's most celebrated moments. Audiences didn't even realize it was Hackman under the beard and wig until later. What could have been a throwaway joke turned into a legendary reveal, a heavyweight actor breaking type to deliver slapstick perfection. 16. Kenneth Mars' Inspector Kemp was pure madness. Kenneth Mars, who played the one-eyed, wooden-armed Inspector Kemp, didn't just follow the script. He built a tornado of improvisation around it. His exaggerated German accent was deliberately incomprehensible, forcing fellow actors to improvise in response. His wooden arm gags, slamming mugs, lighting cigarettes, firing guns, were worked out by Mars himself, often breaking props mid-scene. Brooks was hesitant at first, fearing the performance was too big, but the crew couldn't stop laughing. Even Gene Wilder admitted he struggled to stay in character. Mars's Kemp wasn't parody, but chaos, an eruption of physical comedy that pushed the movie deeper into absurdity. What audiences didn't know was that Kemp's lines were sometimes gibberish, but Mars's conviction sold it. Not accident, but design. Not a supporting role, but a comic hurricane that still steals every scene. The film's script was written in secret. While promoting Blazing Saddles, Gene Wilder and Mel Brooks quietly began sketching Young Frankenstein in hotel rooms and on napkins. Wilder initially pitched the idea as a serious homage, but Brooks pushed for parody. The two wrote furiously for weeks, locking themselves away until they had a full draft. Their secrecy wasn't paranoia, it was survival. Studios were skeptical of period comedies, and Wilder feared that if word got out, the project would be killed before it was born. The clandestine writing sessions became legendary, filled with arguments, laughter, and whiskey-fueled brainstorming. By the time the script hit Hollywood desks, it was fully formed, untouchable, and undeniably brilliant. Not a committee project, but a midnight conspiracy. Not a studio invention, but a labor of love in the shadows. Mel Brooks refused to direct scenes while laughing. Brooks loved his film too much. During takes, he often laughed so loudly that his voice ruined the audio. After several ruined shots, Wilder reportedly told him, "You can't direct if you're laughing into the microphone." Brooks agreed. Sort of. He would often duck behind props or leave the set entirely while the cameras rolled, peeking through cracks in the scenery to stifle his laughter. The result was a cast given more freedom, improvising without a hovering director. What audiences didn't know is that the rhythm of the comedy was forged in these unsupervised moments where actors could push boundaries without Brooks interrupting. Not a hands-on director, but a mischievous ringmaster laughing just out of frame. The monster's makeup took hours of torment. Peter Boyle's transformation into the monster wasn't simple. Legendary makeup artist William Tuttle crafted heavy prosthetics and bolts, which Boyle had to wear for up to 16 hours a day. The greenish tint used for the black and white film was especially painful. It burned Boyle's skin under hot lights. He would often rip off pieces of the latex between takes, forcing the makeup team to start over. The scars, the flat head, the pallid skin, each detail was handcrafted with grueling patience. Boyle joked later, the real monster was the makeup chair. What audiences didn't know was that the monster's clumsy movements weren't just acting, they were exhaustion, pain, and frustration stitched into performance. Not costume, but burden. Not pretend suffering, but the real torment of an actor trapped in glue and plaster. The studio thought it would flop. Universal had little faith in Young Frankenstein. Executives thought black and white was box office poison in 1974. They also believed audiences wouldn't understand the parody tone, calling it too niche, too old-fashioned. Brooks and Wilder were even pressured to insert a narrator explaining the jokes, a suggestion they refused outright. Test screenings proved the studio dead wrong. Audiences erupted with laughter, critics hailed it as genius, and the film became one of the year's biggest hits. Not failure, but triumph. Not niche, but timeless. What Hollywood didn't know was that a spoof of a 1930s horror film could outlast blockbusters of its own era, still quoted and beloved half a century later. The joke was on the executives. A deleted scene was so strange it vanished forever. Few know that a full sequence was filmed where Inspector Kemp leads a village-wide conga line through the castle after the monster escapes. The gag tested so poorly, audiences sat in stunned silence that Brooks yanked it from the final cut. Rumors claim the footage was destroyed, though some crew members swore it sat in Universal's vaults. To this day, no trace has surfaced. The strangest part? Brooks defended it passionately at first, calling it the funniest thing I ever shot. Its disappearance has become part of the film's lore, a ghost scene that haunts fans, not forgotten but erased, not parody but folly. What remains is the mystery of the missing conga, a reminder that even geniuses can go too far. Young Frankenstein wasn't just a comedy, it was a resurrection of cinema history, stitched together from improvisation, pain, and fights that nearly tore its creators apart. What audiences saw was seamless parody. What they didn't see was the chaos, the laughter, and the risk behind every frame. Its legacy is more than humor. It's proof that passion, even when messy, can create timeless art. If you enjoyed these revelations, hit like, tap subscribe, and share your favorite scene in the comments. Because in the world of Young Frankenstein, the real secret is this: the funniest films often have the darkest, strangest stories behind them.